Hi, welcome back to the journey into Forever is the Soul. This week we are on chapter 15. This is the God chapter that Andrew has been telling you about for the last couple of weeks. When God Entered the Cave is the title, and the subtitle is, I see through the eyes of God as God sees through my eyes. There is no separation. Well, Forever is the Soul so far has certainly indicated a lot of unification and an unification in the energy. So there certainly is an indication that there is no separation between any of us. So let's see what Andrew has to say this week about when God entered the cave. Enjoy.
Welcome back to the Forever is the Soul journey. It is January 2nd, 2019 already. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday season. Lisa and I took a week off from videos and everything pretty much and just zoned out, saw some family and friends, which was great, and now we're back at it. So we're back at chapter 15, which is when God entered the cave, with the subline, I see through the eyes of God as God sees through my eyes. There is no separation. That is a presumptuous statement from some people's perspectives. I see through the eyes of God as God sees through my eyes. There is no separation. I remember writing this chapter. It was a big chapter to write, although it came down to 8 pages. I think I wrote about 28 pages to get the 8 pages. It was a weird experience because what I really wanted to do is I wanted to be able to tell a story about what is consciousness for my characters who are, as you know, deceased. And being a fictional writer, it gives me sort of a license. I can go wherever I want. But I wanted to write something sensible. I wanted to write something that I could connect with and in a way help me solidify my faith, which has been part of my life's progression. As I see, the way I see has always kept me kind of always pursuing what is God, what is light, what is this human experience that I'm encountering, and that has been a persistent thing ever since I was a child. I don't remember not thinking about it really. So when I hit chapter 15 and my characters, they've kind of assimilated into this big picture thing, and their egos are well attuned to the experiences that they had lived, and they understand the experiences they've lived. And it's sort of a preparatory chapter. It's a chapter that goes really big in philosophical meaning. So I remember the tagline almost coming to me first. I see through the eyes of God as God sees through my eyes, or tagline, the little philosophical thing. So that became kind of the target. That's what I want to write about. And I wrote a lot about comparative religions and things of this sort, and seeing the commonality in all religion, which if you do explore religion at all, at the core, they're all basically the same. And so I read a lot of books. I almost took a break from writing my book to refresh what other people had said throughout history. So the book starts off, and where it comes, when God entered the cave. Well, when I was doing some preliminary research on what I wanted to do with this chapter, which was to articulate a concept or an idea of God, I kind of almost, like, if you want to fall backwards to the story of Adam and Eve and the representation of the eating of the apple, and all of a sudden something happened. Well, what happened with the eating of the apple, I think I've kind of metaphorically communicated in this chapter, when God entered the cave. And it's a representation of that moment of cognition when we as a species got to a point where we sort of separated from nature and became a thinking creature, not a reactive creature, a thinking creature. And that was the beginning of everything. And what I mean by everything, I mean the beginning of the development of what it is that we are as a modern people today. So I'm really going back to the caveman days, Neanderthal almost, where we began to step out of the animal instincts that pretty much kept us narrow, in a narrow band, and we started to recognize each other. And as we started to recognize each other, we started to develop a neurological system that hasn't stopped developing. So I think that we are in an evolutionary stage right now in our development as a species. And it's a really cool place to be if one can relate to the God that I'm talking about here. So to simplify what I'm saying, I think that where we're at as a species, and I tried to communicate this in this chapter, is that we're neurologically capable. Our conditioning, our programming, and you've heard me talk about algorithms and constructs and all that kind of stuff. These are all transposed into our brain. So we have this brain that's very concerned with now and who am I and what am I and how important am I or how much money do I have or what I'm going to redo when I retire or whatever it is. It's just noise. And it's biological noise, really. And biological noise interacting with our neurological senses, our sensory feed, etc., that produces that level of consciousness. Well, in this idea, I see through the eyes of God as God sees through my eyes, there's no separation, is that I am conscious of the fact that I have all this noise in my brain, which is coming out of the algorithms that are very biological in nature. But I also have this consciousness that's tuned to much bigger things. You've heard me say things like I share my consciousness with my soul, or I, Andrew, am just a minute aspect of the totality of my being. Silly words like that come through me as a representation of the orientation I feel inside myself. I am ego, but I am spirit. Spirit to me is consciousness. So therefore, God to me is consciousness. And I am a pawn or a conduit to the consciousness that we have co-created throughout the last 80, 90,000 years as we've developed a neurological system capable of supporting the consciousness or the constructs of God that we created. Kind of twisty to say it that way. But we're this amazing creature that is multidimensional in how we function, how we respond, how we react. We're very fear-based still, and I think that when I say evolution, we're at a point now where we can actually move past fear. Science is showing us the function of the brain, how the limbic system works, how our algorithms are driven by the limbic system that produce the noise that we perceive on a conscious level. But what I'm most concerned about, and certainly what this chapter is most concerned about, is articulating an idea that takes us out of just the biological consciousness that Adam and Eve kind of stepped out of, when they first became cognitive of the fact that they were something that was mortal. Oh no, that's really scary. And then this incredible journey of learning and growing and developing our ability to project ourselves through facial and hand gestures and so on, right up to the development of economics and religions and political systems and empires and on and on and on it goes. An incredible creative capacity running through us as a species. But we've run up against a wall. And even if you look back at recent history, meaning 1400s, 1600s, prophecy of doom and prophecy of the ending, and the Christian Bible talking about Armageddon, the end of times. Well, in ways, if you look at a neurological animal that's only capable of seeing so far based on the neurology and algorithms that dominate its consciousness, well, we needed something to happen in order to get us to this next level where we can start to see beyond the veil. And I think science, in some ways, is what is allowing us to be able to see beyond the veil, meaning that through understanding how the brain actually works, what the brain does in order to produce this level of consciousness that we function through, it has endowed us with this capacity to truly understand the biological makeup of our species. Now, from there, recognizing that much of what got us here is fear, we're a fearful animal, we need to move to another level of experience. And I think that that's what, in many ways, Forever is all about. And so many other books and philosophies that are, all over the planet starting to awaken, if you will. And as a species, I think that neurologically, we're at a point where we can awaken to a much more evolved creature that's composed of a neurological system that's able to use both hemispheres. And I've talked about that quite a bit in other videos where I talk about left hemisphere dominance versus right hemisphere repression. And it's bringing these two aspects of our brains into coherence and allowing ourselves to move to a higher frequency of consciousness that I see as being not separate from me. So there goes the I see through the eyes of God as God sees through my eyes. There is no separation. I've also spoken about divinity and the idea of seeing divinity. It's a discipline. We've got this brain that's doing all kinds of stuff, inherently fear-based. If you keep teaching yourself, just keep teaching yourself to see divinity. What is divinity? It's good, it's wholesome, it's positive, it's not negative. It's kind, it's loving, it's liberated from the tyranny of egocentricities. And by doing that, and by staying focused on it, then the eyes, the physical eyes, start to see it. And where it sees it is reflected back, which affirms this consciousness that we're all sharing. We live in a group consciousness, I believe, that's rising, it's evolving, and there's more and more science to support Bruce Lipton and some of the stuff these guys are doing now. Their consciousness, what is it that they said lately? Memory is not stored in the brain. Well, if memory is not in the brain, well, where is it? It's in the energy field. What is the energy field? It's a collective that's not separated by physical structure and matter. So it's everywhere. Consciousness, or God, if you will, is everywhere. And we're just conduits to that energy field. So I took 28 pages of psychological bibble-babble and religious belief and so on that I had read and kind of encapsulated into this great big chapter that I realized was just a totally different book. And it was the coolest thing because I was so frustrated about 3 or 4 months of work. And I'm reading the chapter and I'm going, this is so heavy and it just doesn't make sense to Dennis and Maria and what's going on with these guys. And I started to just take the paragraphs I really liked, just kind of pulled them out of this great big document and tried to stay emotionally distant from all the hard work and all the other stuff my ego had entertained itself with. And I got it down to about 10 pages. And then I broke it again after a few days, and it went down again, and I saw a storyline. So right in the middle, well, it's actually not in the middle, there's 21 chapters in the book, this is chapter 15. The whole book jumps, it goes to a different place. So, the first 14 chapters, Dennis and Maria and backstory and what happened to them and what are they doing, what's they experiencing. Then it goes and it starts off with this picture. It just goes, and the narrative is completely different. It's all first-person narrative. So the first person narrating, and again, I'm a fictional writer, is a concept of spirit assimilated into a totality where it's beginning to perceive that there is no separation and that it has always been and will continue to be one with itself, and in that oneness with itself, it will be God or a consciousness that is interrelating with and part of all of our experiences. And it starts off with just this idea when time stops, when the heart stops beating and the brain slowly dies, the stars in the nighttime continue to shine. It's a representation of continuance. It's everything is happening. It's just going to continue to happen. It is not finite. Tides turn as the earth maintains its rotation. Without time, there is a natural order beyond what the human mind can comprehend. The concept of forever is elusive to the human brain. Yes, the brain and body are finite, but the mind in death is transported into the light, into the infinite realm of spirit. And it just continues on. It just continues, and it goes bigger and bigger and bigger. For 8 pages, it takes me, the writer, on this little journey into where we came from, how we got to where we are now, and where we're going from a very different perspective. I started this by saying presumptuous. I see through the eyes of God as God sees through my eyes. There is no separation. And I guess I'll end it with a presumptuous feeling that is based on the perception that we're all here and we're all here together. And I know I said that before. We're all individual within our little framework of being, but we're all contributing. We're all participating in this evolving consciousness. And I think that we've been participating for the last 80,000, 90,000 years with cognition, and perhaps 2 million years prior to cognition. So we've been on this journey for a long time. And as we look at the world around us, and we see all the strife and the tension and the fear and all the craziness that's going on out there, recognize that you can also see the progression and the incredible leap that we in the last 150 years have made in an understanding of what it is that we are. So those are my thoughts on when God entered the cave. I hope you have a great week, and 6 more to go after this, and then we're done this project, and we'll be off onto another one, I'm sure of it. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.